Hey guys, as promised, today I'm going to be talking you through how I set up my themed cages, so I hope you're going to enjoy it. Step number one is to plan, plan, and plan. You can really tell the difference between my themed cages that have had no planning and my themed cages that have been planned well in advance, because the planned ones tend to look a bit more coherent and there tends to be a lot more going on in them. So the way I go about planning my themed cages is to first get my hands on a notebook that I dedicate to my cage themes. Then on the front page I make a long list of all the theme ideas that I want to do at some point in the future. And the reason I do this is because I will undoubtedly forget every idea I've ever had when the time comes to pick one. Then out of that list I pick the theme that I want to do next, and turning over my little notebook page I header the top of it with the name of that theme, and underneath I start writing a big long list of all the items that I want to include in the cage. So things that I may already own, things that I want to DIY, and things that I want to buy in the shops, or at least look out for in the shops. Not only is this useful so I once again don't forget what I'm planning on doing, but it also makes a useful checklist. So when I'm putting the cage together, I'm not going to leave anything out. I can just go down the list, make sure I've got everything ready and everything together, and then I can start putting them in the cage. Another thing I plan for is the type of substrate I'm going to be using in the cage. Now, most of the time I'm just going to be using an aspen and flax mix. That has been my favorite substrate combination for the last couple of months, so that's what I'll usually use. But for some cage themes, like this month's space theme, I want to use something a little different. Now this time I chose to use a combination of soil and sand just to make it look like an alien planet. So I always make sure to include the substrates I want to use on that list as well, because it will be an absolute nightmare if I've got all the toys and all the supplies together, I've spent ages collecting them, I go to put them in the cage, and I haven't got the right substrate, because the right substrate can really make or break a cage theme. A very useful tip to keep in mind when you're planning and collecting supplies for the cage is to always keep your mind and your eyes open whenever you are in a shop. Whether it's a pet shop, a supermarket, a homeware store, a hardware store, doesn't matter. Keep your imagination open, because there are so many different things you could use in a themed cage. Also, if you have a non-barred cage and you want to put a background in it, make sure whenever you go past the birthday section in any shop, check their wrapping paper. Wrapping paper makes the best background for any cage, and every shop sells different kinds of wrapping paper, so always make sure you check, because you never know what you might find. The next stage of setting up is actually putting everything together inside your cage and making your ideas come to life, as it were. So you'll need to start with a completely cleared out cage, so make sure you take everything out, clean the bottom, clean it in whatever way you like to clean it, and then we can get started with a fresh blank canvas. The very first thing I do if I'm having a background on the cage is to take my roll of wrapping paper and cut out a sheet that is the same length and a little bit taller than my cage. Then I line the wrapping paper up against the wall of the cage and fold the excess paper over the back and flatten it down, and then I hold it in place with sellotape. So the sellotape for this is on the back, well away from the hamster. There is no way he can reach it, and the reason for that is because the wrapping paper, if he decides to chew it, no problem there, it's perfectly safe, not going to hurt him. However, sellotape, not such a good thing for them to chew on. And to keep the bottom of the wrapping paper in place, instead of using any sellotape or anything like that, I just use the weight of the substrate to hold it in place, and that works perfectly fine. The next step is to add in the substrate, and as I mentioned earlier, this time I'm using a mix of regular potting soil and children's play sand. The potting soil has no extra things added to it, no fertilizers, nothing, it's just plain old soil, and the children's play sand I buy from the Early Learning Centre. In total I used about a bag and a half of potting soil and half a bag of sand in this particular cage theme, and the total cost of that came to about €5. Super cheap. I mixed some of the sand in with the soil to give it a slightly more grainy texture, and just to make it look a little less plain old soil, so it's just got a little extra texture to it. And I also covered a whole corner with the sand so that Potassium would have a very large open sand bath. This also adds a little more dimension to the cage. Definitely don't be afraid to use different kinds of substrates in different parts of the cage. It gives it a whole new look and it gives your hamster something different to explore. With the substrate looking lovely, it's now time to put in all the supplies. So I first start by gathering them all together so I can see exactly what I have and start figuring out where things might go in the cage. I then start adding them to the cage, starting with the most important things and ending with the least important things and decorative items. The first things I add to the cage will be things like the wheel, the food bowl, the water bottle, the hideaways, really important things that your hamster absolutely needs to have in their cage. I then add in as many toys as possible, which is really important because hamsters can get bored quite easily and this can lead to some unwanted negative behaviors. So you want to make sure they have plenty of things to do, plenty of things to play with. If you find things aren't quite fitting comfortably in your cage, don't be afraid to move things that you've already placed into a different area just to see if it fits better. Once all of the important things are in the cage and you're happy with the way it looks, it's now time to add the decorative items. Now, decorative items may or may not be functional to your hamster, but what they mostly do is just tie together the cage theme. So in my space themed cage, I had a couple of decorative items that I made myself, including some space mushrooms, but I also added in quite a lot of rocks. Now, these are great for a couple of reasons. First, they look fantastic in a lot of different cage themes, but secondly, they provide your hamster with somewhere cool to lay out, which is really important right now because it is so very, very, very hot, as it always is in this country. And they provide your hamster with a surface to wear down their claws, which is also very important because if their claws get too long, they can start causing problems for their little feet. So they are not only a lovely looking decoration, but they are very functional for your hamster as well. So by this point, your cage should be looking lovely and you should be able to take a step back, admire it, and be very happy with the work you've done. But like I said earlier, don't be afraid to move things around if you're not happy. You can just keep changing them around, taking things out, putting things in. If you don't have space for everything, that's not a big problem either. So don't worry yourself. Just keep changing things around until you are happy with the finished result. And once you are, you can put your hamster in and watch them enjoy their new cage. But that is all the advice I have for you on setting up a themed cage. If you need a little more inspiration though, I will be posting a full cage tour of the space themed cage, so make sure you stick around on the channel if you want to watch that. Also, you can check out all my other themed cages in the playlist that I will link down below this video. In the meantime though, if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to leave a thumbs up. You can also share the video with your friends and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching and I'll see you next time. Bye bye!